This Torah class is brought to you by TorahAnytime.com.
Okay, good morning, Rabbi. We continue in the Navi Hoshea. We're up to Parak Yud Beis, Pasuk Tes. Vayomer Ephraim, and Ephraim said. The Metzudas David said, "Ratzolamer va'od Yosef pesha." He adds further sin. Ki yomer Ephraim. Ephraim says, "Ach osharti." Only I have become wealthy. Matzasi oin li. I have found my own strength to me. So to make a correction, we mistranslated it. I mistranslated last week. Oin refers to strength, like hanoisein la'oinim koyach. Oin is strength. Rashis oini. Ruvain b'choriata koichi v'rashis oini. I found my own strength. The Metzudas David explains, Ki yomer Ephraim. Ephraim will say, Ach hasiba sha'asharti. The reason I became wealthy, hu ba'avor, ki matzasi li oin, because I have found strength, b'kayach, le'esoif hoin, to gather wealth. Meaning, it's koichi v'oitzim yadi asali yisachayil hazeh. V'lo Hashem pal kol zos, it's not God's doing. The pasuk continues, Kol yigiyai, in all my toil, lo yimtzu li, I will not find for myself avoin, a sin asher chet, that has deficiency. You will not find in any of my actions any misdeeds. You will not find any iniquity that has sin in it. Says the Metzudas David. All the wealth that comes through my efforts, you will not find in me any avain that there will be chinin or something. What he's saying is, I didn't do any sin, as if he's like deceiving God, as if saying God is not aware of the full ramifications and aspects of his actions.
So refresh my memory, please. Ephraim, is that Bnei Yisrael or Shevet Ephraim?
Ephraim is a reference to the Aseres HaShvatim. So the two aspects of the Aseres HaShvatim, the Chatam that were mentioned in this pasuk is, number one, they say that their wealth is their own accomplishment, and number two, in all the wealth that they amass, they say there is no deficiency and no gezela or avain in any of their actions. Now, right. Now, if we learned previously, just to give you background, that previously God has critiqued the Aseres HaShvatim for something rather remarkable, and that is HaKadosh Baruch Hu saying, how could you do this to me? Are you not aware of the supernatural gifts that I gave Yaakov Avinu, that he was able to grab onto the heels of Esav in utero? That was in the beginning of the parak. Don't you remember the extraordinary strength I gifted Yaakov Avinu when he was able to wrestle with the angel? So the background of the story is narrative of the Chumash, which is actually not mentioned in the Chumash, about the story of Yaakov and Esav. God now responds to Ephraim, and we're going to come back to Rashi's pshat in these two psukim. Va'anoichi Hashem Elokecha, and I am Hashem your God, Me'eretz Mitzrayim, from the land of Egypt. Oid oishivcha va'ahalim, I will yet again situate you in tents, kimei moyed, like in the olden days. Says the Metzudas David, Ve'anoichi aval haloi anoichi Hashem Elokecha, I am Hashem your God, Me'es hoitzeisicha me'eretz Mitzrayim, from the time I took you out of Egypt, ume'az, and from then, ani ba'atzbi mashpia l'cha toiva, influence you for good, umashgiach b'ma'asecha, and overlook your actions, b'hashgacha pratis, in a very specific hashgacha, lo ya'idei emtsoim, not through any means, malache mala kedarcha akam. Don't you know, since the time in Egypt, I deal with you directly with no intermediary. Oid oishivcha va'ahalim, oid yavo izman, the time will yet again come, asher teitze me'agoyla, that you will go out from exile, va'oisha va'oischa, and I will situate you b'derach, on the road, ba'ahalim, in tents, kamay bimei hazman hahu, just like in those days, sheyatzasem eretz Mitzrayim, kiad oilam, because forever, like tasur hashgachasi mimcha, my hashgacha will never be removed from you.
Rabbi, it's just interesting to me that in this pasuk good, Vanochi Hashem Elokecha Me'eretz Ephraim, I don't know if I ever remember when it says Hashem Lakecha Me'eretz Mitzrayim, instead of saying Asher Hotzeisicha Me'eretz Mitzrayim, which is really important, you know, if you want to have Hashem talk to the Aseret HaShvatim about who am I, what's my relationship to you, why did he omit Asher Hotzeisicha?
Mm-hmm. So let's see the Malbim. The Malbim says, "Va'anoichi meishiv lai Hashem haloi anoichi Hashem leikecha me'eretz Mitzrayim." Here, the Bnei Ephraim are being accused of faulty scales. Remember, pasuk Perek Yud Beis pasuk Ches, Canaan biyadai moiznei mirma. Canaan in his hands are the scales of deceit. The Malbim points out, and the Malbim reminds us that when it comes to ribbis and weights, it mentions Yetzias Mitzrayim. In Mitzrayim, the Malbim says, Ki Mitzrayim lo hayu aniyim. Ki Mitzrayim hayu aniyim, they were poor in Egypt. Lo hayu malvim beribis midalusam. They did not lend with usury. V'lo hayu biyadam moiznei mirma, they didn't have deceitful scales. Ki lo hayu lahem shamischa, they didn't have business. Therefore, why does it specifically mention Yetzias Mitzrayim by ribis and by faulty measures? The day you left Mitzrayim, v'sham yulvu beribis v'yoynu b'mishkal v'she'im. I'm sorry. If you begin to lend with usury and are deceitful in your weights, yashuvu la'anyam v'reisham. You will return to your poverty. Al pizem meishav Hashem lahem zachroi ki anoich Hashem lechacha malcham eretz Mitzrayim shahayisa sham ba'oini v'chaysiko. You had nothing there, and if you continue to use the faulty measures, I will put you back in that situation. Meaning, the reason why it always mentions Yetzias Mitzrayim by usury and by faulty weights is because in Mitzrayim they did not abuse that. They didn't have businesses and they didn't lend with ribis. You only need to borrow. If you have...
they have no money.
There's nothing to lend, and there's nothing to borrow, no reason to borrow, there's nothing to buy. So Hashem is basically saying, if you do these practices, you lend with ribis, and you have faulty measures, I'm going to put you back in the situation you're in when you were in Mitzrayim. That's why this is in reference to the Pasuk Ches, where it says, you had moiznei mirma. Hashem reminds them, I took you out of Egypt. Now, that which you pointed out, why doesn't it say that I took you out? So the Malbim seems to be understanding that it's implicit when it doesn't have to say it. I am Hashem your God from Egypt. No, quote unquote. You know what that means. It goes without saying. Well, let's see Rashi here. Rashi has a really fantastic way to learn these psukim. Rashi brings the drush of Rabbi Shimon, who by the way is the father of the Mahari Kara. And Rashi says, Umedrash Agada, Hayadorish Rab Shimon Zechatzak Devracha Matzasi Oinli. Oin could be a language of a debt. Matzasi lishtar chayv sheyeshli malchus al Yisrael. Vayelchu gam echav vayiplu hinu lecha la'avadim. This is an incredible Rashi. Rashi learns that these psukim are referring to an argument that Yeravam ben Nevat exercised. Yeravam ben Nevat was Yeravam ben Nevat was the leader of the Aseret HaShvatim, and what?
He started that, right?
Yeah, he was the king of the Aseret HaShvatim, and he basically subjugated the other Shvatim as Avadim. But he had the following argument: I'm allowed to do that. Actually, everything they own belongs to me. After all, when all the brothers went before Yosef, they said, Yosef, hinu l'chala avadim, where are your slaves? So Yeravam ben Nevat said, I took that seriously. I took them at face value. So I'm the melech, and they're my avadim. That's what it means. Ephraim says, Acha sharti matzasi oinli, I have a shtar chayv here. Oinli, dine shtar, kamay koisin alav oinai. You remember in Gittin? Oinli is the laws of shtar, like it says, you write on him his oin. Uchamay, ba'oini echad uvetimi achas. V'zeh perushai. Vayomer Ephraim, acha sharti, matzasi oinli, Yeravam ben Nevat shahayom yishevet Ephraim. Yeravam ben Nevat, which is from Shevet Ephraim, mispoyer ba'atzmai. He glorifies in himself. And he says, Acha sharti, I have become wealthy, matzasi only, shtar echad. I have one shtar, shekol yisrael avadim li. Sha'avi kana oisam, my father acquired them, t'chsiv, vayelchu gam echav, and my brothers also went, vayiplu lefanav, vayamru hinu l'chal avadim, u'masha kana eved kana rabbi, v'chama mainim shali, all their money is mine, v'fikach ein bichedim eto kashalam. There's no sin if I take all their belongings, because they're my avadim, v'kamasha kana eved kana rabbi, kihem avadai. So what does God respond to that? V'anoich Hashem Eloheinu me'eretz Mitzrayim. Meaning, Gedula haba la'avicha, the greatness of your forefather Yosef b'Mitzrayim me'iti haisa. It was from me. So I think this pshat is being medayik in Rabbi Yosef, what you're medayik in. That why does the pasuk say, I am Hashem your God from Eretz Mitzrayim? So it's not referring to the Exodus. It's referring to the Avadim. It's referring to the Gedula of Yosef in Mitzrayim. I am Hashem your God from.
Everything came from Hashem.
Right, Biladai. It's not me. But rather, Anoichi Hashem Lekacha shenemar b'asar sadebrois shachachta. You forgot it because you made two agolim, the Bnei Ephraim, one in Beisel and one in Bedan. Okay.
What is the second one?
Bedan. Fine. The psukim continue. What is it? So the Malbim says, Oid oishivcha v'ahalim, I will bring you back to poverty if you continue in your deceitful ways. The Metzudas David learned, the same intimate hashgacha pratis that I gave you, dealing with you directly without an intermediary, I will give you again one day. Pasuk Yud Aleph.
So one says good and one says bad.
Right, one's looking at it in a very positive light.
Yeah.
One is looking at it in a negative light.
Yeah, the Metzudas David learns, I will give you that intimate hashgacha again. Then when the day you come out of the galus, and I will bring you in Oihalim, just like when I took you out of Mitzrayim. But the Malbim learned, no, I'm going to put you back in your state of poverty. If you continue
properly in business.
Correct. V'dibarti, now God, okay, look at Rashi. Oido shivcha ba'ahalim, this is Rashi's pshat. Achris mitoichach soichori mirma, I will cut off from among you the deceitful merchants, v'ishivcha ba'ahalim, and I'll put you in tents. Amid mitoichach talmidim oiskim b'Torah. That means like this. I will establish Oihalim Talmidei Chachamim Har Oisek B'Torah. That's what it means, Oihalim. Not poverty, but refer to I will recreate, I will situate and solidify the Yoshev Oihalim Kimei Moyed. Like the first Moyed, back to the beginning of the parak. Who are we talking about? Yaakov and Esav. Yaakov was a quintessential Ishtam Yoshev Oihalim. Pasuk Yud Aleph. V'dibarti al hanaviyim. And I spoke with the prophets. V'anoichi chazayin herbeisi, and I increased visions. V'yad hanaviyim adameh, and through the hands of the prophets, I used imagery. What God is saying is, I tried every means of communication available to try to get you to turn around. Look in the Metzudas David. Dibarti alaskechem dibarti al navim verbesi divrei chazayin. About your deals, I spoke to the prophets. I increased my visions. Adameh ratzona dibarti b'dimyon v'mashal. I spoke with parables so that my words should be accepted by you. I try to couch it in the proper terminology. However, pasuk Yud Beis. Im Gilad Aven. If Gilad suffered destruction, Achshav Hayu, they were empty. Gilgal, at Gilgal, Shivarim Zivecho, they slaughtered oxen. Gamiz B'chaisam Kigalim, their altars were like heaps. Al Talmei Sadai, on the furrows of the field. What does this mean? It says the Metzudas David, Im Gilad Aven, Im Avoin Ba Al Gilad, if destruction came to Gilead, it didn't come coincidentally. Kiyam b'hashgacha, it came through divine providence. L'tashlim gemul, to repay, recompense. Ki ma'aseim hayu achshav, their actions were empty. If they were punished, it was they deserved it. Ki ba'Gilgal makom sham ha'mikdash v'tchila, because in Gilgal, where the temple first stood, sham yizbechu shvarim la'avodas koichavim. They had the audacity to, in the place where the temple once stood, to bring avodah zarah. They had so many. They were so devoted and dedicated to avodah zarah that these altars were like as many as the furrows of the field. Correct. It says Rashi, "Im Gilad Avin, im Balahem Shaber va'Oines." If tragedy happened to Gilad, him garmal atzim ke'achshav hayu v'Gilgal shvarim zizvich la'achim gaz mechosam rabim. Rashi learns like we just learned from Sedas David. Okay, now we learned something very interesting, and this is actually one of the Haftarahs. Parsha Vayetze. So Vayishlach we do Ovadia, right? And Vayetze, Vayivrach Yaakov Sidei Adayim. Now, Sidei Aram.
Then we do a part from Shiur.
Well, that's what we're trying to. So Vayetze we start. The Sfardim begin the beginning of Parak Yirav Pasuk Zayin. However, most Sfardim conclude the Haftarah where the last pasuk we just read. The Ashkenazim begin in this Vayivrach Yaakov Sidei Aram. So this is the Haftarah of Parshas Vayetze. Vayivrach Yaakov Sidei Aram. Yaakov fled to the field of Aram. Vayavod Yisrael v'isha. Israel worked for a woman. Uve'isha shamar. And he guarded sheep on account of a woman. What are we talking about, Yaakov Avinu? So now we know, because we've been speaking in this parak about the miracles God performed for Yaakov. In utero, the strength he gave him to grab onto Esav's ankle, and the ability he gave him to wrestle with the Malach. And now the Navi continues. Says in Tzilas David, Pasuk Yud Gimel, Vayivrach Yaakov, Haloi kishabarach Yaakov ne Esav al Aram. When Yaakov ran away from Esav to Aram, Az avad lilavan ba'avorisha. He worked for Lavan for a woman. Which woman? He Rachel. Then he guarded the sheep of Lavan for another woman. Why? It's because he was so poor. Why did Yaakov have to work for 20 years to get married? Why didn't he tell Lavan, here, I'm a wealthy man, here's $1 million, I'll take Rachel, and here's another $500,000, I'll take Leah. Why do you have to work? Because he didn't have any money. Ki babi adam rekanus. Ucha oimer, it's as if it's to say, haloi chazar berchush gadol. And nevertheless, he came back with a lot of possessions. Umi nasalai harachush. Me! So how could you, Ephraim, make the mistake and say you amassed your own wealth? Don't you know the story of Yaakov, who came empty-handed and he came out b'rechush gadol?
Just have a commercial. He earned it.
He earned it. Now Rashi learns why are we all of a sudden talking in the middle of nowhere that Yaakov ran to the field of Aram. It's like a man who says, okay, let's go back to what I was talking about before. You know, sometimes you have a conversation, you go off on a tangential point, and you say, okay, back to what we were discussing. So back to Yaakov Avinu, where it says, Vayashar el hamalach, he prevailed over the angel. Va'oid zois asisi, I had to do even further. He had to run to the field of Aram. Hutzruch levrayach sedei Aram, yedatam eich shamartiv. Don't you know how I guard him? Uve'isha shamar. Okay.
What did Shama mean again?
He guarded sheep for a woman. There's a Malbim here which is just astounding. This is one of the most astounding things. Let's read one more pasuk. Let's read to the end of the parak, and then we can see how the Malbim learns it. The Malbim turns this whole thing on its head. What a frightening thing. Pasuk Yadalet. Uvenavi hela Hashem es Yisrael mi Mitzrayim. Through the prophet, God brought up Klal Yisrael from Egypt. Uvenavi nishmar. And through the prophet, they were guarded. Says Metzudas David. Uvenavi halo yedei Moshe nevi'ai hela. Through Moses, my prophet, I brought you out of Egypt. Va'al yadav hayo nishmar. B'derech. And through him, he was guarded on the road, as if to say, Hakol ba b'hashka. Let's finish this. Hakol ba b'hashkachasi. It was all through my divine providence. How could you deny and say, she'ineni mashgiach? How could you deny and say, I am not overseeing umakar masa adam? You say, I don't recognize your actions. You know, through a Navi I took you out of Egypt, and through a Navi I guarded you, Rashi, that which you're mavaz in the Navim and you mock them, how could you mock the Navi? Don't you know all the great benefits you got from the Navi Moshe Rabbeinu? Let's finish the parak, and then we'll go back to the Malbim. Hichis Ephraim Tamurim. Ephraim has angered bitterly. V'damav alav yitaish. His blood upon him he will spread. V'cherpasai, and his disparagement yashav lai adoinav. His Lord shall put upon him. Says Metzudas David Hechis Vatzalaymar Achar Shekol Zeh Yadu Al Ephraim. If Ephraim knows all of this, all the manifold benefits that I gave Yaakov Avinu, the strength in utero, his ability to overcome the Malach, his success in Lavan's house. Yet Ephraim still angers God. Therefore, the blood that he spilled will be spread upon him to take revenge. And his shame, that which he was macharev klape mala, that he exchanged God for the agalim, his master, God, will repay his bad actions. Says Rashi, Hichis Ephraim. Ephraim angers his creator to be mevazeh his neviim. Tamrurim. It is bitter to him, because the blood that he spilled when Klal Yisrael sinned to connect themselves to Avodah Zarah, is even worse than killing. Look at Rashi. Rashi says, Kidama v'asher shafach b'hachtia yes Yisrael lahatzmid la'akam v'hamachtia la'Hashem kashaloi min ha'hargai kashar nolamedim. How do we know it's worse to cause someone to sin than to kill them? We learn from Ammon and Moav that they tricked Klal Yisrael to connect to Baal Pa'ar, and Hashem punished Ammon and Moav more than Mitzrayim and Edom. Think about it. Mitzrayim drowned us. Ammon and Moav tried to get us to do Avodah Zarah. And God punished Ammon and Moav more than Mitzrayim. Why? Worse than killing someone is making them sin. So Hashem will put upon them their blood, the guilt that they have on them, that they caused, the kings of Ephraim caused their constituents to serve Avodah Zarah, and the cherpa that they were mecharev shloimei hamelach. Like the pasuk says, that they criticize Shloimeh, HaKadosh Baruch Hu will pay them back. So I want to refer you to the way the Malbim understands these psukim. The simple way we learned the psukim is that Hashem is criticizing Ephraim. Ephraim, don't you know how I protected Yaakov Avinu when he ran away to Aram and he amassed great wealth? The Malbim learns these psukim, turns them on their head. The Malbim learns that the pasuk Vayivrach Yaakov Sedei Aram is not God talking to the Jewish people and telling the Jewish people, look how I protected Yaakov. It's not that Hashem is saying in pasuk Yudalid that through a prophet I took you out of Mitzrayim, so how could you disparage the prophets? Simple pshat is Hashem saying, look what I did for Yaakov. Look how I helped you out through my prophets. The Malbim learns these psukim are Klal Yisrael explaining to God, number one, why we're deceitful, and number two, why we serve Avodah Zarah. You know why we're deceitful? Because Yaakov was deceitful to Lavan. It's in our DNA. You know why we serve Avodah Zarah? Because you had Moshe take us out of Mitzrayim and you didn't do it yourself.
Oh, so, no, wait a minute.
Why didn't you come down and take us out ourselves?
Rabbi,
Says Klal Yisrael.
I was going to ask you. He's giving credit to Moshe, not mentioning the Avos. And the Pasuk tells us, Lo Yadei Shliach, Lo Yadei.
Very nice. But Moshe lifted up his stick and he took us out. So Hashem, we say to Hashem, God, where were you? You should have given Moshe the day off and you should have taken us out of Mitzrayim. Why we're deceitful? Who stole the birthright from Esav? Who grabbed onto Esav's heel? Yaakov. Who stole the Bechorah? Yaakov. Who gave for a pot of beans, an outrageous transaction? Yaakov. Who snuck in, masqueraded as Esav? Yaakov. You know why Jewish people are deceitful? We get it from our Avos, Klal Yisrael says. That's how the Malbim learns the Psukim. Says the Malbim. Look in Pasuk Yud Gimel. They won't be able to even read it in English. Okay? Pasuk Yud Gimel. Look at the Malbim. Vayivrach Yaakov v'navi hela hichis Ephraim tamrurim Shiurai Ephraim hichis tamrurim Hainu she'al hatoichacha, regarding the rebuke shemaychichem aisai, that you rebuke them ala dvar manamarim lamala, for that which it says above, shehu al hakachash v'hakfira, for the denial and the blasphemy, that which you accuse us of serving the calves. And regarding the deceit, for these two things God responds, through mockery and scorn. Basically, the Malbim learns, this is the response, but it's considered a bitter, scornful, spiteful response. This is not a legitimate response. This is like the late sonos of Klal Yisrael. This is, the Malbim learns, Ephraim got even angrier because of their response, b'derech leit sonos v'lag.
They own up to their own problems.
Right? They give ridiculous excuses, right? He angers God and says, what do you mean? Vayivrach Yaakov stay aram, halei mibnei Ramos, umirma barach Yaakov mibnei Esav stay aram. Didn't Yaakov have to run away because of deceit to the field of Aram? Why did Yaakov run away? Because he stole from Esav. He stole the Bechor. Kirimas Esav b'dvar Bechor of Habracha. Vim Cain.
One good turn deserves another.
Now Esav didn't fall.
Right, he gave him Leah.
No, he ran away to Lavan. Why did he run away to Lavan? Because he stole from Esav. Haloi gam Yaakov asa mirma. Av haloi vayavod Yisrael b'isha v'isha shamar sh'achav Yosef es Lavan. He worked for a woman, which is Rachel, and Lavan deceived him, and he gave him Leah. V'niskayim hamirma v'yadoi. Meaning, it's a Zayda Lavan was also a trickster. He's also a ganav. What do you expect? If the Elta Zayda is a ganav, and the Zayda is a ganav, what do you expect from the Enikel? And regarding Avodah Zarah, God, it's your fault. Klal Yisrael says, this is the Malbim, very daring interpretation of the Psukim. That we made Agolim. Of course we made Agolim. That's what we're used to. When you took us out of Mitzrayim, Shekein Be'isha, also you saw Egel. When Kaisel made the Egel, they said, Aseh lanu alekim, ki zeh Moshe, asher halan me'eretz Mitzrayim le'nimahela. Shetchila, what was Moshe's role? He was Amtsoi. He was the middleman between them and HaKadosh Baruch Hu. And when Moshe disappeared, they needed an Egel. So therefore, we also need an Egel. What do you want from us? If you would have taken us out of Mitzrayim directly, then we never would have had problems. Benavi hela Hashem Yisrael me'eretz Mitzrayim. Harei shegam yitzis Mitzrayim ha'yedei Amtsoi, shu ha'navi. We always had this prophet. But these responses angered God. Why? Shehem divrei leitzanos hayardim chadrei baten. This is mockery. This is a way of angering those who rebuke you. You give your kid rebuke. How do you act like it? Why do you do that? and they find some like minuscule thing that you did. Oh, I got it from you. Right? If you'd be allowed to hit your kid, then you would, right?
It's pretty normal.
To what?
The kids are always looking for some of the...
Right? They're going to blame it on you. You told me to do it. Shiur HaKosav, Adoinov. My master, Damav alav yitosh v'charpasu yashav lai, kihem hargu es hamalachim, they killed the kings because of the sin of Avodah Zarah. Basically, the Malbim learns, if you punish somebody for a sin, the one thing you got to be really careful about, make sure you never do anything similar to that sin. Because if you are nichshal in the dust of that sin, then it will come out that you killed an innocent person. Because you can't claim, well, I killed them because they did this terrible thing. Well, if you yourself are guilty of it, then it will transform the blood that you spilled into innocent blood. So the Malbim says, the blood, the Bnei Ephraim killed their kings because they served Avodah Zarah. They killed out the house of Yeravam, the house of Achav, and other kings. And after they killed them, they themselves worshipped the Baal and the Agolim. So then it comes out that they killed for nothing. Therefore it says, and it's like the master of the king who was killed stands on his grave and sprinkles the blood of themselves who were killed on the murderer. So this is analogous to what the Bnei Ephraim did. But again, the Malbim learns these psukim that this is the spiteful and scornful response of the Jewish people. God, we are deceitful because of the avos. God, we are oivdei avodah zarah because you took us out of Mitzrayim through an intermediary. So Be'ezus Hashem, we will continue next week in Perek Yud Gimel. Shkoyach.
You've just experienced another Torah class brought to you by TorahAnytime.com.